Hello everybody, welcome to this instruction video. In this video I'd like to show you the final part of Stitch Story Crochet Along. Stitch Story has been designed by Heather Gibbs from Keep Calm and Crochet On UK. In this last part I want to show you how to join all the squares. So we're going to be looking at different techniques for doing that, and we'll be looking at the border, which is a ribbed stitch border, which gives indeed more texture to our blanket, which already of course has a lot of texture, so the border works well with the rest of the blanket. I'll take you step by step through the different elements that make up this part, so that's the joining, different options you have for that, and then I'll show you the border as well. You will now have a large pile of squares. Here are all my small squares and here are all my large squares. And depending on how many squares you have and in which combination you have them, you will want to look at your layouts of your blanket. I'm going to show you how I'm going to join my blanket and the layout that I'm going to be using for all these squares. This is the layout for my blanket. I've made 12 large squares and 12 small squares. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to join the 4 small squares to form one large square. I'm going to do that 3 times, and then I will have in essence 15 large squares, and those I will join in these rows and those columns. And this is actually my blanket to the side. When I use my blanket I will be using it in this direction, but for joining purposes this is easier because then I've got shorter stretches to work. I'm going to show you how I'm going to join these squares, and these 4 squares are then actually exactly the same as these as joining large squares. You're only going to have more stitches along the side. So this is my layout, but if you've done a different layout, different number of squares, or whichever combination you use, you may have a different layout. Now in the pattern there are also some ideas for how you could organize your blanket, but this is my organization. Take a moment to think of your own and then we can start joining. These are 2 squares that I want to join. Now the first thing you can do with joining is do it with a needle. You have different options available to you. You can join them with a thread on your needle and then sew them together. I'm going to quickly show you how to do that. But this is not going to be the way that I'm going to be joining my blanket, but I just like to show this method to you. We're going to start in the corner that we've marked. So you've got here, so this is why actually we marked all these corners, so that you can easily find them. And what we're going to do is we're going to work from marked corner to marked corner. And when you go to your next square, then that'll also be where you go from your. This will be your last stitch, and then your next stitch will be in the next 2 corners. I'm going to start here, and those are my 2 marked stitches. So I'm just going to take the inside loop. So these are the right sides up. If inside loop, I mean I put them together like this, and that's an inside loop, and that's an inside loop. I'm going to be joining those 2 together. So I'm going to start here in the marked stitch. I'm just going to grab that inside loop there, and the other side I do the same. That's the marked stitch. I'm just going to grab that loop, and then with the needle I'm just going to pull through, leave a yarn tail that you can work away, and then go to the next stitch and grab the inside loops. And in the beginning you just want to keep hold of your yarn tails, that you don't pull everything out. So I'm just going to hold on to this and then pull tight. And now you go again to the next stitch, which is going to be this one and that one. And again, pull through. And if you pull this yarn a little tight, you won't even see that join there. And this is a way to join with a needle and a thread. Now, this is not a way that I like to do because I find this rather time consuming, but this is a way that's definitely safe. And if you're unsure if your stitch count is right, or you just don't like to join squares with crochet, this is an easy way to join it with a needle, and it does give you bit more control over exactly where those stitches go than you might have with a crochet hook. Continue this until you get here, and then your last stitch is going to be like this here and there. That's going to be your last stitch. I'm just going to pretend that I've just joined those two, and then let's say you want to join these two squares next. Then you're just going to go to the next stitch here, your marked stitch. Going to go to that one again, grab the inside loop here, and on that stitch also grab your inside loop, which is easier from this side, and then continue working. And then when you pull this tight, all my white threads are in the way of course, then you will get that joint to be nice and tight. And when you come from this side, you do exactly the same, and then you can join this edge further. I'm just quickly going to take this out because I'm going to be using a different join. Another join you could do is the so-called zipper join or flat join, where you work this edge with slip stitches, again only the inside loops. If you make that join, again go up quite a few hook sizes, because the zipper join especially tends to be a bit tight, so you want to make sure this join is nice and smooth, so then go up a few hook sizes. I'm not going to show you the zipper join in this video because I have a different video in which I've shown that extensively for the Nuts About Squares crochet along, where I did the same join. I'll put a link to that video in this video description so you can easily find exactly how to do that join, because that is a rather detailed join when it comes to explanation. I'm just going to refer you to that video. So if you want to do a slip stitch join here, or a flat join or a zipper join, however you call it, just quickly look at the video for the Nuts About Squares crochet along. The join I'm going to show you now uses single crochets to join this edge. I'm going to go up quite a few hook sizes. I'm going up to a 4.5mm hook to make sure that my join is nice and smooth and just that the fabric doesn't pull or anything like that. So I'm going to go up a few hook sizes. I'm going to work this single crochet join on top of my blanket. I want that join on the top. The reason for that is because it's a very textured blanket. I feel that a textured join will also look very nice in this blanket. However, if you want your join to be at the back, that you don't see it, then be sure to just flip your squares the other way around compared to mine. I'm going to be working with the right sides facing. Then your join will be, or at the right side at the top, then your join will also be at the top. But if you want your join to be at the bottom, just flip your squares over and work the join from the back. But I'm going to be showing you how to do this. So we're going to work from the front of our squares. And we're going to start here. I'm going to show you how to do 4 small square joins, but then the idea for the large squares is exactly the same. Just a quick connection to my plan. I'm going to show you this small square, these 4 squares there, 8, 3, 1 and 11. So 8, 3, 1 and 11. Those are the squares I'm joining. I'm going to start here at the top and work my way to the bottom, and then start there on the right and go to the left. So I'll first show you this join, and then I'll show you that join. With a slip knot on my hook, I'm going to start in the 2 marked stitches. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the inside loop from these stitches. If you look again here at the inside loops, I mean with the right sides up, I mean that loop, that one, and the one on the other side. That's what I mean with the inside loop, so that if I have them like this, back sides facing each other, the 2 inside loops from the 4 loops from the stitches. So on this side I've got that marked stitch, so that's the marked stitch. I'm just going to grab that loop there, and on the other side also, you see there's my marked stitch, so I'm just going to grab that loop as well, and there we go, and work a single crochet. And now I have my yarn on the wrong side, so I'm just going to swap this over because I want this to be there. There you go. Now I've got my yarn to the side that I can make this stitch more easily, because if I had my yarn here it was kind of on the wrong side. I want it on the right. So now on the inside I've got the inside loops of the marked stitches. Grab my yarn, bring it up and work a single crochet. Then go to the next stitch, pick up a loop, and the next stitch here, pick up a loop and work a single. And here again, pick up a loop, and the next one and work a single. And this I'm going to do until I'm to the next marked stitch on this edge. I'm going to continue doing this. You can see how you're getting these single crochets here on top. That's going to give you a textured edge. I'm going to continue this until I'm here, and then I'll just show you how to connect the next squares. So work your join until you get to this marked stitch here. Almost here, almost to the marked stitch. I have one stitch left and then I get to my marked corner. I'm going to work in that last stitch there, and on this side I've also got one stitch left. And if you've got a mismatch, that you've got two stitches here and one stitch there, just fudge that. Don't stress. Just then work. Then either skip one stitch or work, for example, two on this side and one on that side to compensate for that extra stitch. So just fudge that. I do it all the time. Now you're at the marked stitch. So you see here's the stitch that I've marked. So I'm just going to grab that loop and this little, I'm just going to undo this ever so slightly that I just can get to that loop a little easier. I just want to keep the marker in there because when we come back the other side I still need that marked stitch. Just gonna, there we go, that's the loop I need. Just tighten this again. And on the other side, can I get into that easier? Yes, I think I can. There. So that's the marked stitch on both sides. I'm working my last single crochet here. I've worked this entire edge. See, here's those textured stitches, and this gives you a little line on top, and I really like that for this blanket. So this was the first two squares, and now I'm going to join the next two. And now it's important, if I just zoom out a little bit, that you join them in the correct way. Because this was square 8 and 3 that I'm going to join to square 1 and 11. Make sure they're in this order and that you have them the way around that you want them. You will not be the first one to join squares upside down or twisted or turned, that you have them this way where you want it the other way. So make sure you've got them aligned correctly so that we can just continue with this join. So I'm going to continue here, so I'm just going to zoom in a little bit that you can again see where I am. We're now going to start in the marked stitches on these two squares. So I'm just going to pull my yarn tight, and all my threads are of course maybe a little bit in the way, but they do actually help me now to identify exactly which stitch I need. I need this one here. See, that's the marked stitch, so I grab the inside loop there, and on the other side I also want to grab the inside loop. That's going to be that one there. On both sides you can see how I've got the inside loop. Just pulling this yarn, pulling my working yarn tight to make sure that I don't get a gap between my squares, and bringing all these loops together. That will also help to get you a nice and snug single crochet. There. And now you've actually already made this join. And now we can continue in exactly the same way as we did on the first square, which is take up the next loop and work a single crochet. I'm going to continue this until I'm to the other side, and then your last stitch will be in the marked stitch. And if you're joining large squares, you will of course continue until you've done your full edge. But I'm going to stop here because I want to first join all my 4x4 squares before I go to the large square. So I'm going to continue with this edge until I'm to the marked stitch, which will be, there's my working yarn, which will be here, these two marked stitches. And then I'm going to work this join. So I'm going to continue there, and then I'll see you for the next join. This join is all done. I'm now going to do this join. One thing that's important, especially when you're doing your first set of squares, is to make sure this isn't twisted, so that it's not like this. I'm just going to double twist it. So now I've got this one twisted. It looks like everything's nice and flat, but it's not. If you go in here, you see that's twisted. So make sure your work is flat in all directions, so that these so that this edge here is straight. I'm now going to start here, and this is actually exactly the same as a starting point there. I'm going to start here, work up to here, and then especially with this crossover point, I'm going to show you what's happening there, and then we just work that edge again. I have a slip knot on my hook. I'm going to start here in the two marked stitches, again the inside loops, and then work this edge. So start exactly the same as before, grab both loops, work this edge, and continue until you are here. And then I'll just show you how to cross over this edge you already have. Almost to the join. I have 3 stitches on this side, 3 on that side, and then I have the marked stitches. So I'm just going to work these last 3 single crochets, and as you get to this join, it just comes a little tighter because there's just less wiggle room here. 2, and here's my last stitch on this side before I get to the marked one, and on that side. There we go. And now we're at the marked stitch on both sides. So I'm going to see that stitch and this stitch here. So I'm going for that inside loop there and this inside loop here. And there is of course already a stitch in that loop from working in this direction. And I'm needing that one there. And what you can do now, and I am actually going to do that, is I'm going to just remove these marked threads I have here. Come on, come on. So you can just maybe see slightly better what I'm trying to show you. There, that's the one marked stitch that I'm just removing. And this one here, which I'm also removing. So those were the 2 marked stitches where I'm just going to work a single crochet through. To jump over this edge here, I'm going to do a chain 1. And that'll just help me to not get a dent here. Then on the other side you have the marked stitch in this square, that's this thread here, and if I just dig it out, there's the marked stitch on that side. I'm going to work a single crochet again through both of those stitches, the loops that are closest to each other, the inner loops. And again, if I look, this is the marked stitch, see there it is. I'm going to grab that loop, and here you see there's the marked stitch, so I'm going to grab the inside loop there. And now also, if you want to, you can remove the marker because you don't need them anymore. I can just get a hold of it. That's one. And where's my other one? Okay, I'll remove it in a moment. I'm going to pull this tight, but not too tight, because you want this slip stitch will, or this chain one will help you to jump that over, but you don't want it to be too loose because then you're going to get a weird bobble there. So it's just finding that balance. That's the single crochet. I'm going to remove the marker here, and there we go. And now again on the next stitch, and here on the next stitch, work a single, and I'm going to continue doing this till I'm to the other side, and then I've joined these 4 small squares to form one large square. I'm going to continue with this join, and you can see here if I just flatten this out a bit, you can see how that chain one just helps you to, it's like a bridge over this edge. So I'm going to continue this edge until I'm here. And then I'm going to join all my other small squares, because if I just zoom out a bit again, if we look here, I've now done this one, so I'm going to do this one and this one also. And if I just grab my hook, and then we can start joining the large squares. And as such, the large squares are the same idea, but you'll notice that you just need to be careful on this join here, and that's also something I'd like to show you. Here I've got 4 small squares that I've joined to form the same size square as a large square. That's this one here, just to illustrate. Now let's say we want to make this join here. The marked stitches here at the top, they line up. That's where you start this join, so in those 2 marked stitches. And you want to finish here also in these 2 marked stitches, they line up. But you may know, if you've done the maths, that between the marked stitches on the large square you will have 52 stitches, because here we did an edge of 50 stitches and 3 in the corner. Now the corner stitch is the marked stitch, but so you'll have 1 extra stitch before the marked stitch, so that's 51, and you'll have the same here on this side as well, so that's 52. So between the marked stitches here you've got 52 stitches. If we look to the small squares, if we do that maths, you know you did 25 stitches on this edge and then 3 in the corners. So the same idea, you have 25 plus 2 between the marked stitches. So that's 27. You'd have the same here, 27 stitches between the marked stitches. And that's of course 54 stitches. So that means you have 54 stitches on this side, 52 on that side. Also, you may want to take your join as a stitch. So that even would mean you have 55 stitches on this side and 53 on that side. So that means somewhere along the line you're going to have to do a double. That means joining 2 stitches on this side to 1 stitch on that side. And I'd like to just show you how to do that. So I'm going to start here, joining them just in the marked stitches, then work about halfway, and then here I'm going to do a double, and then I'll just show you how to deal with the join here, and then again you're going to do that double here so that it aligns beautifully here at the bottom. And that's kind of this fudging that I'm talking about, that you sometimes have 1 extra stitch on this side than on that side, and just how to deal with that. So at the top here I have the large square, at the bottom I have the 4 small squares. You can see there's the join. And now the difference between these two is that at the top I've got 3 less stitches than I have at the bottom. So I've got 3 more stitches on these small squares than I have at the top, and I need to compensate for those 3 stitches. So what I'm going to do is I'm now about halfway between these small squares. I've just worked a single crochet, again just inner loops up to here. So to compensate for the fact that I have 1 extra stitch on this side, I'm going to take that next stitch on the small squares, but then going to go back to the same stitch that I've already worked on the large square. You can see there, that stitch there is already a loop in there from the previous stitch. If you look back here, you see there's that loop. So I'm going to work 2 stitches in that one stitch. I've got 2 stitches from the small square and 1 stitch on the large square. And now you've compensated 1 stitch out. So then I can again just go to the next stitch as though, and the next one as though nothing has happened. And I'm going to continue this until I'm to this join here. So just go 1 stitch again, 1, 1, 1, until and then I'll show you how to deal with this. So what's important here is that you're going to remove 1 extra stitch about halfway. You're going to be doing the same on this side, and you're going to be compensating 1 stitch here on the join. That's what we're doing. Almost to the center here. Here's the marked stitch. I've got 2 more stitches and then I've got the marked stitch. So I'm just going to work those last 2. This is still 1 on 1. So 1 loop on this side, 1 loop on the next side. Work a single. And then the last one, 1 loop here. 1 loop on the other side, which is that stitch. And join. There we go. Now to deal with the join and the marked stitches here. What we're going to do is the stitch the marked stitch here. We're going to join that in the same position as where we just joined this single crochet on the large square. And on the other side of the join, we're going to do the same. So that means these first 2 stitches after the join are joined in 1 stitch, and these last 2 stitches before the join are also joined in 1 stitch. That way the join itself is connected to 2 stitches on the large square, but netto we have 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches that we're going to join this side to 3 stitches. So that's how we're actually magically going to lose 1. We've just done this last stitch here. So 1 on 1, large square, small square. Now I've got the marked stitch here. So I just need to take that inside loop, which I can't seem to get my hook into. And there we go. So that's the loop from the marked stitch. And this actually already contains the single crochet join from this edge also. So that's a rather full loop. And I'm going to join it to the same position where I've just made the single crochet. And this is exactly the way we've gotten rid of 1 stitch halfway this edge already. And work that single crochet. So now we've done 2 stitches on the small squares to 1 stitch on the large squares. Just going to fold my join over. So now I can actually remove this marker from the small squares. This side, the same. If I just open that up, I'm going to grab the inside loop here from the marked stitch, and now go to the next position here, which is, if I just look properly, is that stitch. That's the next one. And take the following stitch here on the small squares and join that to the same position there we go. So now you've totally tackled this join. You've got the yarn thread here from the join. What I usually do, how I do this, is I put this on a needle and then push that through this join, usually into that gap there. That's how I kind of get rid of this. If I just pull this from the back with my hook, because usually I do this with a needle, I pull this thread to the back, and then you can see how that join there just becomes a very neat join, and that's what you're going for, because you get a nice T join there. You can now continue until you're about halfway, and here again you will have to do one join less on this side than you do on that side, and then everything should line up here for the marked stitches. And if it doesn't, because I don't know, sometimes we make mistakes, I make them also, then just fudge that here towards the end. If you've got one extra stitch on whichever side, just make that work. So again, 2 on one side and 1 on the other to take care of that extra stitch. But especially here in the center, work 2 in 1 on this side and 2 on 1 on that side, and the join itself we then basically just take to the back, and that way you've kept your stitch count equal here. And then work that one here and right up to the corner, and then you've got all the ingredients you need. If I just zoom out a little bit, to make all your joins work. So then you can make your entire blanket, because that's actually quite a lot of work and quite a few joins. So I've now shown you how to in essence work from that corner to this corner. But if you work these long edges, that's the way to go, and then work these edges. That would, for example, be a way to join your blanket. So go and do all these joins. Take your time. This does take some time joining a blanket, and then we can work the border. You've now got one large blanket with all these squares joined, and now we're ready to do the border. I'm going to start on a corner of the blanket. Let's see, for example, this stitch, starting here. I've still left my markers in, so I'm going to start on a marked stitch, and then I'm just going to show you to work the first edge. Actually all the way around. What we want after the first round of the border, because this round is just to get your stitch count right, is you want an even number of stitches. So I'm going to work the corner and then just go all the way around with double crochets, and I'll show you just how to do the seams as well, how to work those joins. So here is a corner, one of the corners of my blanket, and I've got the marked corner stitch there, still left those threads in, and I've actually got a 4.5mm hook here. I've actually gone up a few hook sizes because we're going to be working a border with a lot of post stitches, and that can pull your work in. So to make sure that everything stays nice and flexible, I've gone up a few hook sizes. In the corner stitch here, in that marked corner stitch, going to work a double crochet. Just a single double. That's going to be my corner stitch for this round. I'm going to mark this stitch that I don't accidentally miss this, because in the next rounds we're going to be working 3 stitches in here to mark the corner. So I'm just going to mark this first corner stitch. Oop. Of course the first one will be easy because you've got that standing stitch, so you won't miss it, but on your next corners, your other 3 corners, mark that center corner stitch. Now I'm just going to remove this thread because I don't need it anymore. Now I'm going to work a double crochet on every stitch until I get to the first seam. That's going to be here. And you can work through the back loops if you want to. I'm actually going to work through both stitches because I want to give my border a bit more stability. So I'm going to work a double crochet through every stitch till I get to the first seam, and then I'll just show you what to do there. And at the end of the line you want an even number of stitches between the corners. But first work all these double crochets. Almost to a seam here. I'm still working double crochets, and I'm almost to a marked stitch there, and then here, this is my last stitch before that marked stitch. So I'm just going to work a double in there. And now over this seam you can work a double crochet 2 together over the 2 marked stitches, for example, or you could work a double crochet 3 together, so over the marked stitch, the seam and the marked stitch. So that's up to you, whichever method you feel gives you most stability. So I'm going to go through the marked stitch here, pick up a loop and take 2 off. So if you want to, you can also go through the seam here, so for example through there, and pick up another loop, or you can go through the marked stitch on this side, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to work a double crochet 2 together, but you can also do a 3 together here, really both are good. There. So either way, this really ties your seam in. And then continue again, either through the entire stitch or the back loop, whatever works for you, whatever you like most. Continue and work a double crochet on every stitch till you get to your next seam. And when you get to a corner, you're going to work 3 double crochets in the corner and mark that second corner stitch. So you're going to go to your next seam, etc., etc., until when you get here. This is an actual corner of the blanket, so in that marked stitch there, work 3 double crochets and mark that corner stitch. So I've got a few more stitch markers, so I'm just going to mark the corner stitch. That's you can keep track of your corners. So in all your corner stitches you have 3 doubles, and along your seams you have a double crochet 2 together or 3 together, whichever you prefer, and make sure that between the marked corner stitches you have an even number of stitches. So skip a stitch or fudge if you have an odd number, but 50% chance that you have your stitch count right. When you've gone all the way around, you've closed on your first stitch, that first stitch there with the slip stitch. What we're now going to do is we're going to work alternating a front post double and a back post double. We're going to be alternating those 2 stitches all the way around. I'm going to do a chain 2. That's going to be my first post stitch. Then on the next stitch, that's the corner stitch here, it's going to work a front post stitch. Now it doesn't really matter if you start with a back post or a front post, but just a post stitch. I'm actually going to remove this stitch mark because I don't think I need it. Is it a front post? Which should I just do? I just did a front post stitch. Then the next is a back post stitch, back post double. And then the stitch after is again a front post stitch. And the next is again a back post stitch. And this you're going to alternate all the way around, so don't worry about the corner, just go 1 front, 1 back. It's going to make you a zigzag pattern. As you can see, you can already start seeing the zigzag here. And the next is then, I'll show you 2 more, a front post stitch followed by a back post stitch. There you go. So go all the way around, and then when you get here you're going to work your last post stitch and then close on that chain 2 with the slip stitch. Round 2 of the border is actually exactly the same as round 1. So you now have this entire round of these textured stitches, the alternating front and back post doubles. I'm going to do that again. So I'm going to start with a chain 2. That's just going to be my first stitch, and then also going to close on that stitch at the end of the round. And then on the next one, I'm going to work a front post double around the front post double, and then a back post double around the back post doubles. And you're going to be alternating between these stitches and then go all the way around. So this is, depending on how large your blanket is, of course quite a bit of work, especially if you have a very large blanket with many squares. I don't have that many squares, so my blanket is a nice lap size blanket. And then back post again. So I'm just going to keep on alternating like this, just go all the way around, work one stitch at a time. I'm just going to work this last one here, and then when you get back to the beginning, there you go. So you can see how you're getting that nice textured effect there. And when you get back to the beginning here, this that chain 2, close on that chain 2 with either a slip stitch or an invisible join, and then your blanket is all done. And when you've gone all round on that last border round, join with an invisible join, and then you're all done. So then if you want to wash your blanket, block your blanket, those are things that you can still do to finish and to really get it into shape, because you may have found that it pulls a little bit or that your squares aren't exactly the same size, and blocking it will help to sort out those little differences. But that brings us to the end of this series of Stitch Story Crochet Along. I want to thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again next time.